So today we're going to kick it off with Lena Mulder. She is going to be our first speaker today. She is with Search for Common Ground. Really excited to have her here for you all. So it'll be about 10 minutes of talk and then about 10 minutes of Q&A. And then we also have two other speakers who I will introduce shortly as well. So thank you all for coming. Lena?
Take this and the clicker.
Oh, you know what?
I have a microphone. I need the clicker. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. So happy to be with you all. And I want to start by telling you about a friend of mine. So this guy is Elombe, and in 1998, you might remember in the DRC, he's a cop now in the DRC. And in 1998, Africa's Great World War was happening. And he ended up joining one of the local militias as a child soldier. He felt that it was the best thing to do to defend his community. He learned how to fight, he learned how to shoot, he learned how to kill. And he was pretty proud of himself. And about 7 years later, when the peace process took place, he was offered an opportunity. He was 18 years old by then, and he was offered an opportunity to join the police. So he said, all right, I'm going to put on the police uniform. I think I can actually protect my communities maybe even better by being a police officer. But now when I talk to him, he's just so frustrated because instead of finding around him a group of police officers that are really committed to protecting the communities, he's finding a group of people that are corrupt and that are abusing people and that are extorting people. And Elombe, his name, it actually means in Lingala, bravery. And he got it when he was a child soldier as a nickname, but now I feel like he really needs this bravery to deal with some of the problems in the Congolese police force. So this friend of mine here is a prison guard. His name is Agus. He's from Indonesia. And I remember when he told me that he got the job at the prisons, he was so happy because he'd been without a job for a long time, and his wife wasn't working, and his daughter was really ill. So he was really excited. And when he showed up for work, he just completely freaked out. Like, he had no idea what he was getting into. He knew that there were sort of people convicted of terrorist acts, but when he showed up at the prison, he freaked out. And he actually sent me this video.
Sebagai kepala lapas yang baru, semua penanganan napi di lapas ini akan baru juga.
Solusi yang terbaik di lapas ini adalah dengan cara saya, bukan dengan cara siapapun.
Sudah banyak yang saya lihat dari kehidupan di lapas ini, tapi tidak ada kebaikan yang bisa saya petik.
Jadi kamu pikir selama ini cara saya dan cara anak buah saya itu salah?
Iya.
Kamu itu jangan melupakan keluarga, Gung. Ingat biaya menik loh. Pengobatan jantungnya itu harus kamu perhatikan.
Mana sepatu bola yang Bapak janjiin?
Dari pertama saya melihat kamu, saya sudah mendapatkan di sinar mata kamu itu.
Kita akan memulai sesuatu yang baru.
Ini buat kamu.
Apa yang kau cari ada di depan mata kamu. Kamu tidak perlu mengejarnya sampai ke seberang lautan.
So that's right. Elombe and Agus, they're not real people. They're characters in the TV shows that we produce at Search for Common Ground. And you might be asking, why am I here talking about human rights and social justice and talking about TV shows? The thing that we've learned over 35 years, thousands of projects across 35 countries, is that empathy matters. Empathy enables us to step into the shoes of someone else. It enables us to see the world the way they do. And it enables us to recognize that they're not just one thing, that within our identities, there are multiple parts of who we are, and that our humanity is diverse. And in that space and our ability to get inside of another person's humanity even when they're our adversary, even when they're our opponent, is the beginning of what we see as social change and search for common ground. Because what we know is at the height of conflict, at the height of really horrible abuses, it's the conflict that determines who we are. I'm Sunni, you're Shia. I'm Tutsi, you're Hutu. I'm Christian, you're Muslim. And empathy enables us to get inside of each other and see that multiplicity of our identities so that we can say, yes, Jewish and mother. Yes, Hutu and teacher. Yes, police officer and poet. Yes, prison guard and soccer fanatic. And for Search for Common Ground, that's the beginning of getting from an adversarial mindset of me against you towards the we. And in tackling social justice and in tackling human rights abuses in some of the most deadly conflicts around the world, we've understood that this is a powerful place to start to drive change, to nourish that space of common interests, to believe that the journey of the other who was your adversary may end up to being one of your ally. So we've been tackling this on security and justice issues, but there's a challenge. When people have inherited a conflict from their parents, from their grandparents, when people have never known a state apart from being a parasite and being a source of abuse, when people have never been expected to be treated equally, it's difficult to imagine. So that's why we've also learned at Search for Common Ground the power of imagination. We use drama, reality TV, and participatory theater to press pause on reality and enable us to step back and imagine and try something else. Like being elected president of Palestine through a reality TV show, or being the prime minister of Nepal or president of an Arab country. Because that transformation that will emerge out of the empathy and the imagination, out of finding that common ground, will open up the doors for everybody to be able to make choices. So civil society, human rights groups, organizations that seek to rally and lobby for change have a huge role to play, but it's also people like Agus and Elombe who also make choices. So we've done this in many different countries, and I just want to give you one sense of what it looks like in Indonesia. So in Indonesia, using the power of empathy and imagination, combined with face-to-face dialogue and interactions and exchanges, we've been able to contribute to the transformation of violent extremism. One of the most groundbreaking pieces of work was working with the Densus 88 counter-terror police force, who'd been really accused of committing human rights abuses, and put them in dialogue with human rights defenders, so that together they were able to build a standard operating procedure and way of working that would protect human rights and uproot some of the sources of violent extremism. We used radio, comic books, TV dramas, documentary films to enable people to explore their identities in all of their multiple forms and to feel more comfortable with the other. And in that space, they were able to work together in Islamic boarding schools with police officers, with community members, with religious scholars towards one goal. And all across the world, we work with security forces, in prisons, with military, and we recognize that that power of the collaborative approach, built on firstly the empathy and sparking that power of imagination, creates a sense of trust and alliance that can really drive forward change. Here we have a marathon of the military together with women in Eastern Congo, and in many of the communities where we've worked, we've seen that citizens have improved their level of trust in the military to protect them and keep them safe by up to 90%. So in 10 countries across the world, we're working specifically with military, prisons, and security forces, together with human rights and civil society actors. And one of those places is South Sudan, where it's one of the world's most deadly conflicts. And People have been forced to flee their homes. There are tens of thousands of people in IDP camps all around the country. And the abuses that South Sudanese face today are at the hands of the police and the military, but also because of the inter-community conflict. So we've used participatory theater there as a way of understanding the conflicts that people are going through, playing them out in a way that people can empathize with both the perpetrators and the victims, and then pressing pause and asking the people themselves, how might you like this to play out differently? How would you like to end the story? That participatory theater enables people to see new possibilities so that when reality turns back on again, they may be able to make new choices.
المسرح الجمهوري هو المسرح اللي انت بتكون بتتكلم بتمشي للجمهور وبتعرف المشاكل الحاصل في المجتمع. بعد ذاك تقوم تجيب المشاكل ده تقوم تعمله في شكل بتاع الدراما، تقوم تقدم لهم كمادة للجمهور، وبعد ذاك تشوف الحلول عشان ما يطلع من الجمهور ذاته، بدل انت ما تجيب الحل تخلي الحلول يطلع منهم. هو مهم انه يعرف حاجة حصل، لأنه this is not our story. We get the story from the community.
What the actors try to facilitate is getting people to think and to look at conflict with different options of response and non-violent response.
All of us get time to look at ourselves in the mirror. The same thing a drama does. There is performance happening somewhere. Any member of the society must come and watch. Then he comes and identify with what is happening there.
التغيير ده أنا قاعد نشوف إنه في تغيير طوالي، لأنه أنت بتلقى زول بيجي بنفسك في قضية اللي تقدمته ده بكل صراحة، يعني بكل صراحة يعني فعلا يعني.
I've lived to learn to appreciate others. Any person who stays with me or grew up with me is my brother, and a woman is my sister.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your attention, and ready to answer any questions or hear any comments you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lena. Any questions from the audience this morning?
Thank you. I work in a space here around women who have been trafficked. They're American women who have been prostituted or incarcerated, experience homelessness, addiction, usually coming from a childhood rife with abuse and neglect and trauma. Also trying to intervene at the foster care vulnerability point because around 100,000 foster youth disappear every year and are scooped up by traffickers. We wrestle with, this is not a warm fuzzy topic. It butts up against our cultural acceptance of women and men, but predominantly women being sold for sex as a cultural norm. When we talk about it locally, I mean, people are much more comfortable talking about trafficking that happens somewhere else, because when you talk about it locally and you address people and let them know that Cambridge is ground zero in Massachusetts, that it's happening here, and it's girls from Maine, it's girls from Quincy, it's young girls starting and then women ending up. I'm wondering if we could use this idea of participatory theater, because what we struggle with in terms of fundraising is we first have to disrupt a story that people have locked down. They have decided who the prostitute is, who the trafficked woman is. They've decided, and they've decided all the players. So I'm wondering if there's anything locally that we could collaborate on to help disrupt that story.
Yeah. And I think that what you're touching on is, again, this insight that if we don't see the other that we're trying to change as human, if we don't find some things that we can identify and understand with, then we'll simply move into this pathway of trying to eliminate the other and condemn the bad people and shun them and lock them up and that kind of thing. And that doesn't really bring about that durable social change. So you want all the different stakeholders around that question of trafficking to feel that this concerns me and that I'm not being blocked by my own a sense of separateness from the other. So it might be through small YouTube web series. It might be through testimonies, but something to happen to enable people to see even the traffickers themselves have interests. They're making a choice. And how is it that they might make another choice? And unpacking those stories through any range of formats just might open up new pathways for collaboration. Excellent, and it's a challenge. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. So to follow up on what you just said about presenting personal testimonies and personal stories, do you find that that's equally effective, or is there something about the imagination or suspension of belief that's involved in fictional TV shows or theater that is particularly helpful?
So I think there's two things. There's the reality, and there's getting to know why is it that I've become who I am, why is it that I've made that choice. But what I also tried to share was that there's something about moving towards what isn't part of our reality that's hugely transformative in social change work, human rights, and social justice. Because it's just impossible to imagine. So through theater or through these kinds of drama reality shows, you begin to step into another reality. And in that experience, you're feeling comfortable. You're trying out how it feels. And then when you step back into reality, you're more ready to do that. And I think that's what the difference is. When you have testimonies of people who've been experienced human rights abuses and other kinds of things, you almost reinforce a narrative that can lead to some people believing that it is essentially intractable. That's the balance between the story and the power of imagination.
I was just wondering, have you guys ever partnered with any Native American reservations within the Dakota country or anywhere else? Just watching the videos, it's a lot of, I got off the reservation and went to college and experienced. I got off the reservation and got to experience, life off of it, but the social injustices that you showed and talked about, are really prevalent on the reservation. So I'm just wondering, have you ever considered, also helping out the Native American communities with reconciling, with healing, with the oppression that happened to our people long ago, and then the lateral oppression that continues to this day? I honestly feel this would kind of benefit.
Yep. Yeah. I can't underestimate how much I agree with the fact that there is that huge unhealed wound around that community and the relationship with other communities in the United States. We have not, as of yet, worked and applied this common ground approach to that particular issue. We have done so in other parts of the world where you also will have indigenous communities or particularly marginalized ethnic or tribal groups, and have done these kinds of activities to bring them in. So I'd be more than happy to see if there's a way that some of our experiences might inspire or offer any support to that kind of work here in America. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we have time for one more question before we got to move on to the next speaker.
Hi there. I was just wondering if your organization has any sort of model or something that we could take away as a base to kind of go from, and if we want to do it yourself with a group of students or with our own personal organization, so you have a base to start. Do you have anything like that available?
We're just right now revamping what we're calling this common ground approach training, which explores empathy, identity, conflict analysis, win-lose, win-win, all of that. And we're hoping to be able to roll that out. But we have many different materials that can be applicable. So if you contact me afterwards, we have other case studies of working with youth and working with different people that you could try to also apply for the context in which you're working. So let's connect after. Yeah.
Okay, one more question, then we really got to...
I feel like funders today are so concerned about impact, and I'm just wondering how you measure empathy or how you measure your impact.
Well, two things. I mean, empathy is the path towards the impact. So because we're able to create that level of impact, of empathy, we're able to measure that civilians are more protected by the Congolese police force. In Indonesia, through our different programs, we've had people that were convicted of terrorist acts that were able to transform and leave prison and be very productive members of society. So there are both qualitative and quantitative ways that we measure all of our programs. And I think what I was sharing today was that empathy is something that it's grounded in the way that we do our work, and then it leads to a more durable change because people are then feeling as though this is my victory. This is both the police and the civilians' victory together. This is both the counter-terror unit and the former violent extremist victory together. It leads to more enduring change. But we absolutely are able to measure this, and I would say there's a growing field of thought, of study as well, about how empathy also actually works in the brain and can enable us to be more able and capable and at ease of working with difference, which is, again, a skill set that we seek to build on that road to driving forward that durable change. And again, we're more than happy to speak to you after this about this.
Thank you so much, Lena.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for your attention.
And our next speaker in today's showcase is Blair Burns from International Justice Mission.
I don't need that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That was awesome. I'm really excited to be here. It has been, we've only been here for, I think, for an hour and a half, and I've learned a lot already. So hopefully we can continue to do that. My name is Blair Burns, and I've already met several of you, but I'm looking forward to meeting world-class innovators who are all among us. I have the privilege of leading a team of, I'm going to change this slide real quick. I have a privilege of leading a team of more than 700 staff around the world who are protecting people from human rights abuses such as trafficking and slavery around the world. I was asked in this time to lead with the slide declaring the problem. And the problem is very simple in a nutshell, that slavery still exists in our world. In fact, there are 45 million people right now being held as slaves around the world. And that is more than at any other time in human history. That sounds like a big number and a problem that is too big to solve in our lifetimes. But I'd like to introduce you to an old friend of mine named Raman. When I joined IJM in Chennai, India at the beginning of 2004, Raman was my first client. My job was to ensure the prosecution of slave owners in places like brick kilns, rice mills, rock quarries, and plantations across southern India, where about 1 in 3 people working there are slaves. And that job proved both more critical and more difficult than I ever thought it would be. You see, the good news for Raman was that slavery is illegal in India and has been so since the 1800s. In fact, the good news for slaves all over the world is that slavery is illegal in every country in the world right now. The bad news is that these laws against slavery are simply not enforced. Like all great things, if you cannot deliver the thing to the people that need the thing, you might as well not have the thing. You guys can totally quote me on that. I will say it again. If you cannot deliver the thing to the people that need the thing, you might as well not have the thing. Think vaccine for polio. Decades ago, in fact, many decades ago, we came up with the vaccine to cure polio. Yes, it's done. Sweet. The problem is we just have gotten right now to the point where we are about to eradicate it in our world. Why did it take something like 7 decades to do that? Because only now have we been able to deliver this most critical of things to the children who most desperately need that thing. So in the case of slavery, everywhere where it continues to fester in our world, we have the thing that the slave needs. We have the law abolishing slavery. But what we do not have is a way to get that protection of the law to where it needs to go. We have law, but we do not have law enforcement. Here it is in very real terms. If ramen's owner, Kandasamy, had thought for even a second that by enslaving Ramen and his family, he might just go to jail someday, I don't think Ramen ever would have known slavery at all. What is the system that is meant to deliver enforcement of this law? It is the justice system. It is that system that exists just about everywhere in the world, comprised of police, comprised of prosecutors, comprised of courts, comprised of social services, that is meant to bring accountability to criminals like Kandasamy, rescue and restoration to their victims like Ramen, and deterrence for future crime. I think of it like a pipeline. It is supposed to deliver the protection of law through these sections of pipe: police, prosecutors, judges, and social workers. So, if what I said was true, that every country in the world has a law abolishing slavery, and just about every place in the world has something called a justice system, then what's the problem? The problem is, where there is slavery, the system is broken. It doesn't work. The pipeline is mangled and torn apart. The police don't proactively investigate cases. They don't rescue victims. They don't arrest and charge suspects. Prosecutors do not prosecute the cases, which is a totally bad quality in a prosecutor. Courts don't hear the cases, and the government social services are barely existent. And when the pipeline is broken, the law's protection just simply does not get delivered. So for Ramen, there is a law in India abolishing slavery for all the world to see. But for Ramen, it doesn't matter. So when I met Ramen and his family, he and his family lived inside of Kandasamy's rice mill. Ramen had been there almost all of his life, and as far as he knew, he was held there in slavery because of a debt his father had taken many decades before. Ramen's life in the rice mill consisted of a nearly unbroken string of 18-hour days that began at midnight with the boiling of rice in huge steaming cauldrons. It would continue with the drying of the rice under the hot Indian sun, and what they were called to do was to rake the rice to continually expose it to the sunlight. And they do that all day. After removing the husk and polishing the rice in the late afternoon, I know, I didn't know you had to polish rice either, but anyway, Ramen and his fellow slaves would load the milled rice into burlap sacks weighing about 100 pounds each, and then throw those 100-pound sacks over their shoulders and load it into the warehouse where it would be ready for shipping across India. The process ended at 6 o'clock in the evening, and at that time, Ramen would eat with his family whatever scraps Kandasamy would provide. He had to eat the scraps that Kandasamy would provide because he wasn't free to go get those for himself. And those scraps usually consisted of a soup, almost devoid of nutritional value, that was really just rejected rice and some water sloshed into a bowl. And after that, they would try to get a few hours sleep, and then they would begin again. But in March of 2004, everything changed for Ramen and his family. We, in partnership with police and a local magistrate, entered Kandasamy's rice mill to rescue everyone enslaved there, and Ramen and his family were free. This picture, real quick, every time I look at this picture, I always think that if they're just playing with the goat's head, which I think is pretty twisted and weird, but actually the goat is behind those people. I just feel like you should know that. So Ramen and his family were free, and my job was to set out on the prosecution. So I did that, and ultimately we won a victory in the prosecution case against Kandasamy. At least we thought we did. The judge said he is guilty, Kandasamy is guilty of perpetrating a bonded labor system, which is a system of slavery in India. Our hopes were then quickly dashed when the judge turned to sentencing. He sentenced Kandasamy to pay a $40 fine. and imprisonment. So we're like, oh, okay, imprisonment. Imprisonment until, and I quote, until the rising of the court. And we're all like, what does that mean? Well, it turns out what that means is that Kandasamy, for enslaving people for entire generations, over 100 of them, and taking their lives from them, he was being asked to sit in the courthouse until the magistrate finishes his business that day. And then he will have paid his debt to society and can go home. It's, for those of you thinking about your high school experience, it is sort of like high school detention, except it's not quite that bad. We, of course, appealed the case. We lost. And I got this information, and about the same time I got some other information. I was reading an investigative report from our staff indicating that Kandasamy had enslaved 30 new people. And I thought to myself, I'm like 29 at the time, still idealistic. I thought to myself, yeah, so this is how injustice dies. This is how justice dies. If we can't get accountability in these cases, not only can we not deter the crime, we can't even stop the same perpetrators from committing the same crime. Because the law is not being delivered to the people. But it was a mixed bag because Raman and his family were free. He bravely took up residence in a village just across the road from Kandasamy's rice mill. He had been a slave there all his life. He had nowhere else to go. And so predictably, one day, Kandasamy's enforcers came out for Raman and the others in the village promising revenge. They said, do you think that you have won? We're not going to leave you alone without taking revenge. We're not going to do it now. We'll come back. But Raman went to the police, as did we, and the police actually acted, and Kandasamy never messed with him again, and Raman wasn't through. Eventually, Raman convinced Kandasamy's new slaves, our staff had been unable to do this, Raman convinced his new slaves to cooperate with our staff and with the police. And they were all rescued and a new prosecution commenced. And this time the justice system actually worked. The police investigated and provided good evidence. A new local judge took on Kandasamy's prior conviction and used it against him. She convicted him of an Indian statute called the habitual dealing in slaves. And no one had been convicted in India under that statute since the 1860s. And that court's decision was just upheld actually last week on appeal. IJM has been working for 20 years across the world to protect people like Raman. We've been doing this long enough to have concrete examples of places where law enforcement has gone up. And by law enforcement, I don't just mean the police, but the functioning of the justice system has gone up. And where that has happened, the crime has gone down, and down quite dramatically. Our national teams work closely with local justice system officials to solve the problem of delivering the protection of law to the people. We apply systems thinking to ensure that with our partners, to ensure that the entire justice system is going to work. And we've been able to verify quantifiable reductions in the total number of victims as a result. Our strategy is pretty simple. It's to go to the places where the most people are being affected by the worst types of violence in the world. So we are, across the world, in 11 countries, we are working on both gender-based violence and slavery to combat them in our world. In 20 years, IJM has rescued, with our partners, over 40,000 people from the hands of violence. We have convicted over 1,300 perpetrators. We have restored over 4,500 survivors, and we are helping to protect 21 million people. The title of this session is Innovation in Human Rights and Social Justice. Sadly, the idea of keeping people safe through the rule of law by a justice system is not actually a new idea. It's a very old idea. I like to think of it, since we're around innovators, I like to think of it as retro. But hopefully we're coming up with innovative ways to engage a justice system to make it work. But the problem is that right now, justice is still not known by the 45 million people who are enslaved. So with that, I'd like to invite you to collaborate with us, to use your skills, to use your technology, to use your networks, to use your social media presence and join us in the work that we are undertaking with our partners across the world to end slavery in our lifetime. I think we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair.
I'll stick this down here.
Questions from the audience?
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. My name is Marlon Peterson. I have a question. In the work you've been doing around the globe, have you ever seen situations where the problems or the criminality actually is embedded into the justice system itself?
Well, yes. And if I don't answer your question, rephrase it. But yes, when we go to a place like India or a place like the Philippines, essentially everywhere we've gone, the biggest problem when we started has been that the law enforcement agency is the instrument of the abuse. So, for instance, we have undercover investigative footage from Calcutta, India, where a police officer in full uniform is guarding the entrance of the red light area that is full of young children being sold for commercial sexual exploitation. And our investigator asks the police officer who is charging admission, so you have to pay 200 rupees to get in, charging admission, and say, well, what if the police come while I'm here having sex with a girl and put me in jail? And he says on the camera, well, that's why you're paying me 200 rupees to prevent that from happening. Also in India, we have another undercover video of a slave owner, and our investigator was trying to ask the slave owner, she was pretending to be a slave owner herself, and she's like, I keep having this problem of slaves running away from us. What should I do? And this slave owner said, well, duh, all you have to do if your slave runs away is you call the local police in the jurisdiction where the slave is run to, and you say, I will give you 300 rupees, which is like $6, to go and find your slave, and then for an added amount, he will beat that person nicely in the village, and then bring them back to your rice mill, beat them nicely there, so everyone knows that you can't run away. So yes, there's lots of criminality in that justice system. Does that answer your question, though? Okay, thanks. Oh, real quick, one last thing, though. I just want to say this. So that's all true, and that's the reality in the developing world. The reality is also, and this is easy for people to miss, the reality is also that for all of those police who are really bad, there are police in those systems, and even the worst ones that we've found, who are very, very good and are completely disempowered. They came to the police because they wanted to protect people from violence. But they get to the system that's wholly corrupt. And what we have found is when you start doing this work for over a decade with a police department, those people start to rise up, and the bad ones start to get sent out. We'd like them to be removed from the force. They get sent out to unimportant posts instead, but we do start to see the good being empowered. So it's quite hopeful.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I used to work in the Gulf region, mainly in Dubai, and I believe a lot of the Gulf countries have a form of slavery, but it's under the guise of employment. So a lot of people from India and Southeast Asia, they come to these countries, and these huge contractors, they take away their passports, and they're forced to work like under extreme conditions. And I think a lot of people heard about the people who died building the stadiums for the Qatar 2020. So what is being done about that? Because it's under the form of employment, the government knows about it, and it's backed by huge corporations and companies.
We have not done any work in those countries, and so I don't know a lot. What I will say is I did have a case in India of a Filipino girl who had come over to work for a Middle Eastern family, and they did the same thing. They took her passport, wouldn't allow her to leave the house, beat her up all the time, and we were able to get her out. I learned a lot from that case, so yes, that's happening. Some of those sending countries are being very proactive in protecting their citizenry. The most proactive country right now is the Philippines, which has truly become the #1 public election issue in the Philippines to protect our foreign workers. And so they have engaged heavily in Malaysia and in the Gulf countries to protect their citizens. Right now, I think that's the best way forward, but I don't know much more about it.
We have time for about 2 more questions.
Yeah, we work a lot with orphans around the world, and one of the things we have to spend a lot of time in is educating them that they actually have hope, they have rights, they have those kinds of things. How much time do you guys have to spend, like you said, it's hard to convince the workers to cooperate. What's that process look like for you guys to actually, re-educate them that they are worth something?
A lot. So we do a lot on the back end after they're rescued, and a lot of our, we call it aftercare. A lot of our aftercare in India is just about dignity. So it's taking people to register to vote, taking them to get their ration card, which is sort of equivalent to a Social Security card in the United States. Things that like say to you, I am a citizen. And I used to think, when I started there, I used to think, these are small things, they can do this on their own. And our social workers are like, no, you don't understand. This is really about assigning value and worth in the society to them. And it's a beautiful thing. But on the front end, I would say our bonded labor slavery, or our forced labor slavery work is the most unique in terms of investigation. Because the investigator has to do the classic investigative stuff that an investigator does, like gather all the incriminating information. But also they have to build relationships with the slaves so that the slaves will speak the truth when the magistrate comes. Because the way this works is the magistrate comes to, with the police, comes to the brick kiln and says, come talk to me, are you having a problem? And they've got, in that moment, they have to say it. They have to say what's happening. Otherwise, the magistrate will just leave them there. And so there's a lot of work done on the front end. And so in India, on our forced labor work, most of our investigators are actually social workers because they're better at that piece than a sort of a traditional investigator.
Hi, I work with an organization that rescues kids from sex trafficking, mostly in Southeast Asia.
Sweet. Which one?
Destiny Rescue.
Yeah.
And one major hurdle we're facing and continue to face is pointing out the problem can a lot of times shame the government, and then we face a lot of opposition on the local level from law enforcement. So how do you guys manage that? Because you go in and you're trying to solve a problem and pointing out a huge problem and still working with the good guys and not getting the rug pulled out underneath from you.
It's a huge, delicate dance, especially in Southeast Asia and in India, where the governments are very sensitive to shame. And sort of the traditional human rights approach is to just take a big bat of facts and just pound them on the head. We've actually taken some of that as and turned it as an advantage because there's plenty of human rights agencies out there beating the Cambodian government on the head, for instance. And so when we come to them, we're like, look, like we can help you out here. Like we're not gonna stick up for you if you don't earn it. But if you wanna get serious about this, we'll help you do it. We'll do it alongside you. And when you succeed, we'll be the first to say it. And that's been a huge help to us in Southeast Asia and in India. It happened pretty quick in Cambodia. I would say in India it's taken a long time because 1 out of every 6 people in the world lives in India. So it's just a hard ship to move. But like now, for instance, we just conducted a prevalence study in Mumbai and Calcutta on sex trafficking. And normally when we release something like that, because it's pretty bad for the government, we release something like that, the government is like all over us. Like, why are you saying that? I mean, why are you saying this? And in this case, the Indian government just recently came to us and they said, so when you release this, we want you to go ahead and put our government seal on the report. So we can just tell everybody that we're all aligned on this. And I mean, for me, who started in India 13 years ago, that was just unbelievable. Like that they really wanted to. So I think it's sort of dialing back a bit on the shame, and then working, and not just doing trainings, but working closely with them. And so you actually build relationships with the people that you're working with. Like, where the senior police officers are your friends, and they understand that you're on their side. But they also understand you're not going to wilt when they want to do something squirrely.
Thank you so much, Blair. Appreciate
it.
Yep. And our last speaker for today's showcase, the Innovation, Human Rights, and Social Justice, is Hind Elanawi of Humanitarian Tracker.
Imagine that we're all trapped in this warehouse right now. You want to leave, but you're not sure that if you walk outside, you're going to get killed. In December of last year, a professor from Harvard reached out to us and said, working with other organizations, there were 150 people trapped in eastern Aleppo in Syria. Working with the right helmets, we needed to find a safe evacuation route for them. The time was clicking and they were in desperate need of help. So from 5,000 miles away, we looked at our crowdsourced data and saw that we had received data from the ground from eastern Aleppo. After analyzing it, we made the recommendation that actually the safest thing for these people to do was to stay put. The government forces had surrounded them and they were waiting for them to leave. Our data confirmed what they had already suspected through looking at satellite imagery. I'm going to tell you today about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. When the conflict broke out in Syria, there was very little information coming from the ground and people didn't really know what was going on. So a group of us got together and created Syria Tracker. It's the flagship project of Humanitarian Tracker, and it's an online open platform that combines crowdsourced reports from the ground with data mining and machine learning to give a holistic view of what's going on in Syria and also empower citizens to tell the world what's happening to and around them. Over the last 6.5 years, we've received over 150,000 reports from the ground. People can submit these reports through the web, through Syria Tracker, online. The categories you see here were dictated by the reports that we received and have evolved over time to include human rights violations, disease outbreak, refugee issues, and relief and development needs. In terms of news and social media, we've mined over 650,000 news articles and 680 million social media posts covering all sides of the conflict. From our experience, the crowdsourced reports from the ground are far more representative of the events when you compare them with media coverage. And that's because it's hard to put media personnel in dangerous areas. Plus, over 6 years, there's a lot of media fatigue. So while they may be covering one event over here, they're missing a lot of other events going on in the country. So putting it all together, Syria Tracker has been quoted by the IFCC as the longest standing crowdsource to date, and we often cover events that are missed by the media, including a report of the first polio that came back after it was eradicated 14 years earlier. We also work with our partners to analyze the data, and we were one of the first organizations to provide concrete evidence of civilian targeting, including the rising proportion of females killed, as reported here by Marianne Pearl. Now, our job is to elevate these voices from the ground, and this article had over 2 billion worldwide reach. Our data has also been incorporated in official sources and reports, including USAID, State Department, the UN, and official media outlets. That, ladies and gentlemen, is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Providing data and analysis is important. It empowers and connects local citizens, but it also drives humanitarian intervention strategies. It identifies trends and changes over time. We work with a lot of organizations, and when we looked at their data, we discovered that 10 of them were working in one area addressing the same problem, when if you just drove 5 miles down, there was an urgent need for all these resources that were wasted essentially in one area. Humanitarian Tracker was selected in 2016 as a top global innovation and showcased at the Solutions Summit hosted at the United Nations. Syria Tracker is our flagship project, but we also do work in education, in empowering women and girls, disease outbreaks, flu, Zika. We're getting ready to launch a project in Guatemala that tracks corruption. We have the power right now to impact future generations to come. But we know we can't do it alone. We need you. So if you're passionate about any of the things you heard today, we need partners that believe in our mission, that want to deliver effective humanitarian relief, that really want to empower civil society. In-kind contributions. If you're a data scientist or you have marketing skills, talk to us, see how we can work together. And also financial contributions that keep our work going. My name is Hind Al-Hinawi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Humanitarian Tracker. If any of the things I said ring true to your heart today, I'd love to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Hind. And our last round of Q&A for today's showcase. One moment.
Good morning.
Hi.
My name is Hani Termanini. I'm with Karam Foundation, and we work with the Syrian refugees in Turkey and here in the States.
Can you speak up? I'm sorry, I have a hard time hearing you.
My name is Hani Termanini with Karam Foundation,
Oh, wonderful.
and we work with refugees, Syrian refugees in Turkey and here in the States. My question is about credibility of data. I mean, how you decide what data to approve or to accept to contribute to this reporting.
Thank you, Hani from Karam Foundation. We actually worked with your organization as well, putting your data and helping you derive insights. That's a very important question. So we are volunteer-based, and it was kind of created that way for a reason, especially at the beginning, and especially because we were working in Syria with a lot of very sensitive data. So we refused funding, as crazy as that sounds. We said, you know what, we don't want to take your money just yet, because we didn't want to be seen as a mouthpiece for any government or organization or any private funder. So for the last 6.5 years, our operation is solely based on volunteers and in-kind support. People that donate products, people that donate services. About the data itself, we only publish about 6%. 6% of the data is only published because we care a lot about verifying it. If we're not able to verify it, and we do that in a number of ways. There's actually a whole paper that was written, and I can share that with you. But one of the ways we do it is that we corroborate it with sources on the ground. If we can't verify it, we don't publish it. And if we have a report that we feel very strongly about, like we're 99% this happened, and we still can't verify it, we'll publish it and say this report has not been verified, but we feel like it's accurate. So we're actually very careful about this verification and not accepting funds at the beginning to establish credibility, and that's why our data has been able to be used by official sources.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I guess my question would be, has there been any talk for you guys as an organization to create some sort of framework that you could apply this to other humanitarian crises or to be used by other nonprofits focused in different parts of the world?
Yeah, so we are actually applying it to other conflicts. Right now we're in talks, and it's kind of secret, so I can't really talk about it, but I'll give you just a little bit. Building something that would detect diseases in Africa. So that's still in talks. We are scalable, and our methods are proven, and they've been working not just in Syria, but also we responded to Sandy. There's been a little response with the Haiti. But it is scalable, and it's usable and applicable to other conflicts, which is why we feel like now we're at a point we need to expand our funding so that we can scale it and apply it. And also the My Guatemala project was a project where we were approached by these civilian groups, and they wanted to track corruption in their government, and we helped them set up the platform, create a short questionnaire that would get them a baseline data, and then build on it from there. And people can upload pictures and videos, like I just paid a bribe at this place, here's whatever picture of it, to try to get that conversation going in the country.
Hi, I'm Phil with TechSoup. And this is fascinating. Phil with TechSoup. This is all fascinating. I'm imagining that a lot of your best data on the ground would be coming from local civil society organizations.
Yes.
And so I'm wondering how you get those relationships out across the region, across Syria, across Africa. So.
Thank you. So when we started Syria Tracker, we actually purposely wanted to be low-key because we didn't want to be attacked by, virtually attacked by the government, and also for security and safety of those people that we were working with on the ground. So we launched it using word of mouth. We told a few people. And actually when we started, we weren't sure whether we were going to sustain. Most crowdsourced efforts are short-term. They're for particular crises and then it's done. First week, we didn't get any reports. And we were like, okay, maybe we just close shop and go home. And then as word of mouth picked up and we started getting contacts from people on the ground through those civil societies that really wanted to engage and were eager to tell the world, like, hey, this is what's happening to and around me. We started getting reports, and then it just was like wildfire. We went from like 0 to 40 to 100, 60. So word of mouth, really. And then over the past 6.5 years, we've built some very solid partnerships based on trust and mutual respect, and also knowing that their voices are being heard and incorporated.
We have time for one more.
Hi, I'm Katie from the Impact Hub here in Boston. And I'm wondering, I know generally in some of the big data for big data in humanitarian relief efforts, there's a lot of conversation with the crowdsourcing and like open source pedagogy around how do you make sure the right people are using the data and it's not causing more harm than good. How are you thinking about or vetting that?
So when we first started Syria Tracker, the #1 consumer of the data were people inside Syria. And they wanted to know, okay, this village just got attacked. Are they coming for me? A loved one is missing. Has he been reported? Looking through footage and video. So depending on which angle you're looking at the data, that's how you're going to look at your consumer. So we have governments that use our data. We have mainstream media, and therefore we created a dashboard, especially for the media and those folks that are not very tech savvy and they just want to know, okay, from March 2011 to March 2012, how many people were killed in Homs during February? So they just go and put that information in and then generates a report of all that information. If you're a UN organization and we have received reports on relief and development needs, that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for human rights violations, which is a majority of our data is around human rights violations, and you want to prosecute it, we're hoping that at some point we can use this as evidence. And I know that's tricky, but that's what you're looking for. So it just depends on which angle you're looking at. And I'm sure the governments and other bad actors look at our data as well. But the point is that we're public and open, and more good comes from it than harm. And generally, if they want to harm us or take down our website. Is that your question?
Thank you so much, Hen. I appreciate it.
Thank you.